Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and break down what is honestly a monumental shift in global policy. Today, we're looking at the landmark Section 123 agreement that was signed on July 22, 2026, between the United States and Saudi Arabia. This is one of those rare, fascinating moments in international relations where energy policy, nuclear technology, and decades of diplomatic deadlocks literally all collide into a single piece of legislation. It is a massive geopolitical puzzle. So let's put the pieces together. To do that, we'll run through today's agenda. 1. A historic nuclear deal. 2. The enrichment exception. 3. The Abraham Accords condition. And 4. Reactions and roadblocks. Let's kick things off with Part 1, a historic nuclear deal, defining the 2026 U.S.-Saudi pact. So, the absolute core of this pact hinges on what experts call a Section 123 agreement. What does that actually mean for us? Well, in plain English, it's the legal mechanism that allows the U.S. to share civilian nuclear tech and materials with another country. By signing this, Washington is basically handing Riyadh the keys to build their very own civilian nuclear program. That is a massive transfer of power and knowledge. And what's kind of wild is how this whole thing evolved across two very different political eras. It wasn't just some overnight idea. The initial groundwork actually started way back under the Biden administration. But after things stalled out, the Trump administration revived the talks in April 2025, pushed it to Congress by February 2026, and officially sealed the deal that July. It's really a rare case of a bipartisan baton pass on a super complex international agreement. Moving right along to Part 2, the enrichment exception, breaking nuclear norms. Now, this is where things get really interesting. Historically, standard U.S. agreements have this strict golden rule: absolutely no nuclear enrichment permitted on foreign soil. Period. It's like the ultimate safeguard against proliferation. But the 2026 Saudi Pact, it completely shatters that norm. For the very first time, the U.S. is actively assisting another country in enriching nuclear material locally. Now, to be fair, uranium enrichment is explicitly banned in the text. But even so, tearing down those old guardrails is a total paradigm shift. To put that into perspective for you, international watchdogs were completely floored by this. A BBC expert bluntly stated that a U.S. deal for uranium enrichment within Saudi Arabia would be, quote, quite shocking. It absolutely changes the calculus of nuclear capabilities in the Middle East. And because it's such a huge concession from the U.S., they attached an unprecedented diplomatic catch to the whole shebang. Which brings us to Part 3, the Abraham Accords condition, the diplomatic catch. So this wasn't just a free giveaway. President Trump made his condition explicitly clear on Truth Social. The entire nuclear deal hinges on Saudi Arabia normalizing ties with Israel. Basically, no normalization, no nuclear deal. It is a strict geopolitical ultimatum. To understand the weight of that demand, let's look at the nations currently in the Abraham Accords, which were brokered back in 2020. You've got Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. Saudi Arabia would absolutely be the crown jewel of this group. Convincing Riyadh to join this list would be a geopolitical earthquake for sure, completely reshaping alliances in the region. That is the ultimate prize the U.S. is demanding in exchange for this nuclear tech. All right, wrapping up with Part 4, reactions and roadblocks. The geopolitical reality. Looking impartially at the Israeli perspective, the diplomatic conditions of this pact are viewed as a huge win. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu strongly endorsed it, calling Saudi Arabia's potential joining of the Accords a, quote, historic leap forward for peace in the Middle East. For Israel, establishing formal ties with the Saudis would permanently rewrite their security and economic standing. But hold on, because there is a massive roadblock here. Former U.S. Ambassador Michael Ratney hit the nail on the head, pointing out that the Saudi view of normalization really hasn't changed at all. They still require a credible pathway to a Palestinian state. A shiny new nuclear deal might be tempting, sure, but it doesn't just automatically erase decades of deeply entrenched regional loyalties. And if you look closely, the fine print tells a much messier story. The New York Times reported that the actual physical pact submitted to Congress doesn't even have a finalized normalization plan yet. Why? Because Saudi Arabia actively pulled back during the fallout from the Israel-Hamas war. So actually implementing this highly conditional deal on paper is incredibly complicated right now. We are watching a high-stakes gamble play out in real time. The U.S. is breaking its own historical rules, offering unprecedented nuclear power in exchange for a diplomatic miracle. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Will the promise of these nuclear ambitions be enough to force a rewrite of deeply rooted Middle Eastern diplomacy? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes on how this historic gamble unfolds.